Hi, my name's Colbey. I'm a physiotherapist that works for NeuroMoves. I also work for the NeuroMoves development team, so sourcing equipment and helping with other little odd jobs around the country for all of our clinics.
And today we're going to talk about electrical stimulation. And I don't really know a whole lot about it. And I came into this interview not doing a whole lot of research. So, Colbey, do you just want to go through what electrical stimulation is? Because in my head, it was functional electrical stimulation. But when we were talking about it peripherally before this recording, you're like, no, there's more to it than that.
Definitely. Look, I think the way that my brain works the best is to categorize it in some different areas. So basically, there's 3 different types of electrical stimulation that we'd use for a rehab purpose. So the first one, like you said, is functional electrical stimulation, or we just call it FES for short because it rolls off the tongue a bit smoother. So that is electrical stimulation that you're using for a functional purpose. The most common one that we use would be a FES bike. So it's actually you're using that electrical stimulation to do the simulation of a cycling motion. So it's a functional movement in most instances. I would argue that maybe it's not that super functional, but for example, you can do other programs. Like there's a lot of really cool reach and grasp programs to train hand movements, which we would call FES. The other 2 types, the other one that is probably the most common that people would see is TENS. So TENS is actually short for transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation, and that's used for pain. So a lot of people use it to try and manage sort of tricky pain, because you can increase your pain threshold and make a pain signal or something that has been painful for a long time. You can really just dull that signal. So it's a really good way just to try and help manage pain. It's one of those things where it's you can't really use it. You can't really overuse it. You can have it on for a long period. A lot of the programs we set will give someone a unit to take home and use it themselves. They set the program, put it on the right areas, and leave it go for about 4 hours at a time if you need to. So you can really, really manage your pain a lot more in a more healthy manner than some of the other methods. It avoids medications. It's sort of like your hot and cold pack as well. You can kind of avoid those medications that will always have a pretty much a side effect.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about functional electrical stim a little bit later, but I want to kind of focus on this TENS business. So when you're talking about it increases the pain threshold, actually, let's go back a bit. Are they all applied in the same manner? So when I'm looking at FES, it's those pads that are sticky pads that are like connected to the skin in certain areas, next to some muscle groups, and then it basically fires off electrical stimulation, which will fire off the muscle. But in terms of pain, is it a similar kind of method?
Look, I suppose it is similar in terms of you use the same hardware. You can use a similar device. Most devices that do TENS, especially the good ones, can do FES as well, or can do electrical stimulation. We didn't talk about the third type of stim, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
The third type of stim is we call it NMES, neuromuscular electrical stimulation. Think of it as very similar to FES, but it's just there's no functional purpose. So think of maybe you're trying to do weights, something like that. You're just stimulating one muscle. It's not a functional movement. It's just a way to strengthen, and you want to do lots of repetitions. So those are the 3 main types. You've got NMES, which is kind of just your strength training for an individual muscle group. May not be a very functional movement. In a very similar fashion, you've then got FES, which is probably multiple muscle groups at the same time while it's trying to simulate a functional movement, no matter what that functional movement can be. We'll talk about a bit more of some ideas or some things that we would do that with later on. But then that third type is your TENS. So that's completely different sort of goal, which is pain management.
Yeah, because I think, I don't know, up until this conversation, it didn't really occur to me that there would be a pain management aspect of electrical stimulation, something I'm super interested in, and also quite a lot of people who are part of our communities, because pain is never ending for so many people.
Definitely.
And it comes in different forms. And I don't know if people know, but like long-term pain at various levels can actually start rewiring the brain in a way, right?
Definitely.
And not in our favor, guys. So if you're talking about pain reduction and then it being like up to 4 hours, are you just sitting around or are you doing something activity based?
Yeah, look, it's kind of like the unit that I would usually give people. It's kind of like an old school beeper. You just has one of those little buckle straps. You just strap it onto your belt, strap it onto your chair, wherever you need to. Shove it in your backpack. Let the wires do their thing, and just leave it go whenever you're doing something. So you kind of think, when is the most painful part of my day, especially for people that are in chronic pain. By the way, we could have a whole episode on chronic pain. I got so
Oh,
much
we're
to talk
definitely going
about
to
with that.
do, I think we should just do the next recording on chronic pain.
Yeah. Oh, look, there's so many interesting things about chronic pain, but this is a really good way just to try and manage some of those kind of lower level pains, but those niggly ones that are quite annoying. And there's a lot of useful areas that you can use it on. But basically, you just attach it to the area that's painful or that you're experiencing the pain. Usually, you'd use 4 electrodes, which is different to say your neuromuscular stimulation, where you're kind of just using 2 electrodes. It's a bit easier on the brain thinking about neuromuscular stimulation, because you're kind of going one end of the muscle, other end of the muscle, turn it on, the muscle works. Boom, easy as that. TENS is more about the probably the more superficial nerves, and you're getting a whole bunch of nerves. So you're trying to get a larger area generally. So if you were doing the lower back, you'd kind of go one on one side of the lower back, one on the other side of the lower back, and then you'd do one electrode a little bit higher up, and then on the other side. You'd want to crisscross them so you get a really good focal point of that sort of stimulation to increase the pain threshold for the area that you're feeling that pain, so you won't actually experience or notice the pain so much.
Okay, and so when you have these electrodes and you've got them on for quite a number of hours, and is there sort of a median as to how long you keep going on this track for, or is it all based on feeling?
Yeah, look, it is. It is really just while it's on, it's working. It's not a treatment for the pain. It's kind of like a really healthy way of Panadol. You're not actually treating the cause of the pain, but you're managing the pain, and which can actually help you treat the cause of the pain more effectively. So it's kind of like if, as anyone's ever talked about, a cortisone injection.
Yes, I
You
have
get
had
this
that.
injection if you get this injection in a
I'm
painful
not doing that
area,
again.
should give you good choice. Should give you about 3 months of reduced pain. 3 months of reduced pain in that area. Now, that pain will come back if you haven't treated the cause. You need to use that window to treat the cause of the pain, which is often certain posture habits or strengthening areas that you need to really focus on. And this is exactly what TENS can do. You put the TENS machine on, you get that pain managed, and you're using that reduced pain period to try and combat. So maybe you do some exercises, you do a program, or if it's, say, affecting you while you're working, you'd be able to concentrate a bit more, and you can kind of do quite a few different things while you're experiencing reduced pain from that treatment.
Okay, so is this something that's available in our gyms, or is this something that's available, like if people can't access our sites for one reason or another, like how do they get this sort of equipment for them to be able to use it?
Yeah, pretty much any specialised physiotherapist should have a portable unit. They're super cheap. Like if you were to get one on your own, they're super cheap. Like you're looking $250. You could buy one by yourself with electrodes. You're good to go once you know how to use it. So kind of you could try and see if it was useful for you. It's one of those things, not everyone likes hot packs, not everyone likes cold packs. It doesn't work for them. Maybe it aggravates something else. So you could try it. I think all of our clinics would have them available in a little portable version. So you try it during a session, see if it helps, see if you like the sensation. Some people just hate the sensation, can feel a little bit pins and needly, like something's crawling on you in a way. But other people just go, oh, that feels nice, like a little tiny little massage or something like that, little ant massage.
So then, like, how do you know how far to go, right? So on those electrical stim machines, there's a dial, and you can turn it right up to 11 if you wanted to. But like, what would be the recommendation for dealing with specifically pain?
Yeah, look, the limit is what you can tolerate, basically, and
Okay.
everyone's going to tolerate different. Look, I know that I have had some friends around and we go, all right, let's see who's the toughest. And we put it on our abs. That people use it as well to show men what like
Is that
labor
the period
contractions.
simulator?
Yeah, well, yeah, period pain or what labor contractions would feel like. You can stimulate
Knew
a
it.
similar sort of muscles. And
Yeah.
we sort of put it on to see who could get to the highest voltage. And there was one woman there that maxed it out. And that she had nothing wrong,
And she was
no issues,
unaffected.
just very, very high pain threshold. And I think, and that's just different for everyone. The beauty of these machines is they have a net charge of zero. So you've got positive and negative charges that go into it. So there's no heat or anything like that. There's no negative repercussions. You don't turn it up and it starts to heat up. That doesn't happen. You'd wear the batteries out quicker, and that's the only sort of negative side effect.
Okay. Yeah, no, now I'm super interested in this pain thing now. And we'll talk about pain in more detail in another episode. Um, so we're using it for pain. Talk about it functionally.
Yeah, well, we'll start with the NMES first. So just to strengthen off, because functionally we'll sort of jump in from that. So
yeah, cool. I actually have a question for that one.
Perfect. So I think first of all, it's good to note that look, anyone who has an upper motor neuron lesion, so we're talking brain or spinal cord injury, this is really good for. If you have a lower motor neuron lesion, so sort of advanced MS, where it's actually the nerves that are affected outside of the central nervous system in certain areas, or you had like a nerve injury, it won't actually activate the muscles. It still won't get through. So it's kind of for those upper motor neuron lesions, which is your brain or your spinal cord.
So, how does it work?
Anyone with those conditions will basically, you're thinking of bypassing the need for that connection because you're kind of just working periphery and locally on those muscles. So usually we go, all right, I want to move my muscle, then I get that signal from my brain that goes down and makes that muscle move. We can bypass the need for the brain by sending that signal through these electrodes that are attached to that muscle. So you'd put two electrodes on, one at the one end of the muscle, one at the other end of the muscle. Then what you'd do is you'd get the settings right. That's where you probably need someone who knows what the settings mean. We don't need to delve into that too deep. It gets a little bit intricate, more intricate than is required for now.
Consult your local physiotherapist or exercise physiologist.
Exactly. Get the settings right, and then you just start to ramp it up. And what you'll start to feel is that muscle contract, and then you want to get that nice strong contraction, and then the machine will turn off and on. So it's that repetitive nature. What's really important is if you are unable to do anything else with that muscle, this is kind of your only way to strengthen that muscle. So if you have no voluntary movement or just a tiny twitch of movement, this is kind of your only hope to try and really strengthen that muscle. So it's a really good way to try and get it going nice and early.
You were talking about how it's just really SCI, brain injury, that kind of thing, right? Now, if we were to break it down into like paras and quads, okay, so if I can't, for example, move my arm and I want to do a bicep curl or whatever it is, just weights, it's not necessarily doing anything. I just want to lift a weight, right? So I can't do it without using the stimulation. What happens? You're building up that muscle and then you turn off the electrical stim. Does it still function at the same thing? Like what happens? Because I don't really understand how like you go from using the stim to try and bypass it to move a muscle to move. But if you're heavily reliant on it, am I understanding that like with enough time spent on the electrical stim, you're going to move that muscle without the stimulation?
So definitely that's the goal. There's a lot of recovery that's going to happen after a spinal cord injury, or even there could be some secondary weakness or something, but we're looking for people that maybe they can't quite move it against the resistance of gravity. Maybe they just don't have that strength there to build up the muscle enough to where they can actually get that movement. So this is a really good way to actually build up that muscle. Maybe we can build it big enough so you can get that little bit more movement, but we're also trying to really rewire the brain. So it's that's the plastic brain is what we're thinking about as well. We get that repetitive movement going through that muscle. Hopefully we can create some new pathways in the brain or even in the spinal cord. We know that we can recreate new pathways in the spinal cord with lots of repetition to try and bypass the area of injury or the lesion, to try and recruit that movement again, if that makes sense. So hopefully we can still build that strength. That is the goal with this. It's not just to do it basically do it to have strength while the machine is working. So build it up enough to improve the strength outside of the use of the machine.
So for somebody who's got MS, right, and did you say that they couldn't use the...
Advanced MS will probably start to affect your lower motor neuron. At the start of MS, it is a central nervous system thing as well. So you would be able to use it for people with early on in MS, but then you don't really get those messages to come through either way because it's affected the lower motor neuron as well. But definitely at the start, it is quite useful. We have a lot of people that use it.
I wouldn't want like people who are listening to think to themselves, oh, well, maybe if I try it, it might work for me.
Yeah, look,
you know what I mean?
My instance is try it for everyone. If it doesn't work, there's no negative effects except going, this doesn't work for me. Try it for everyone. Look, maybe you've still got some sort of innovation where you can try it and it will work. So look, there's no negative effects other than going, this doesn't work for me if you've tried it. So I would just try it with everyone, really. There's no harm in it not working.
Just give it a go.
Definitely.
Just give it a go, guys. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But don't feel disheartened by that, right? So it doesn't matter what sort of condition or disability, if it's just something that, doesn't work for you at the time. I think maybe people might put a lot of emphasis on that one thing working for them, and it doesn't happen that way. So don't feel disheartened, basically.
Definitely. Look, the way that I would approach it, if you can't move a muscle against the effects of gravity, so for example, if your arms are by your side and you can't bend your elbow up to touch your shoulder, then that's not being able to move it against gravity. Give it a try. It's worth a try to see if you can start to use this to get that movement going, then to build up the muscles, and maybe you'll be able to do that movement without the need for the stimulation after you've gone through a bit of a strengthening program with something like this.
Okay. Now let's move on to the functional component of it. So Tell me about that.
So this is my favorite component. This is where you can get really creative. So with some more advanced machines, you start to go, all right, we're going to have more channels so we can stimulate more muscles. I know we use a machine, so we've talked about just stimulating one muscle in neuromuscular electrical stimulation, NMES. You can actually, the machine that we've got in a lot of our clinics, you can stimulate 12 channels at once. So we're thinking about 12 separate muscles. So maybe the way that we usually would approach it is 6 on either side for a larger scale movement. So some of the movements that we're thinking of is the one that we probably do the most would be a reach and grasp, specifically maybe people that have had a stroke or recovering from a stroke, because a lot of the time it's that reach and grasp that's a really, really important movement that would help them functionally. But we can do it for anyone with, anyone with any neurological condition that affects the upper motor neuron. So it really helps to reach and grasp. So you think 12 channels, we've got some channels to stabilize your shoulder blades. We've got some channels to help you reach out and open your hand. We've got some channels to grasp something and pull it back towards you. That machine will then come to turn those muscles on in the right order to do the task functionally and the way that would usually do it if we were using our brain, but we're actually just bypassing the need of the brain and using that electrical stimulation to activate those muscles. So that's one example of it, but there's lots of different ones. Another common one is a anti-foot drop device. So some that it only usually stimulates 1 or 2 channels. You'd sort of attach it to the upper part of your shin, and every time you go to take a step, it lifts your toes for you, so you're not having to change your whole walking pattern. So it's another really cool advanced way to use what we would call FES.
So as somebody who's had their spinal cord injury their whole life, I actually forget about how I don't know the movement of a walking foot pattern, right? I just see a lot of people walking, and then I see the wearing their shoes, but I don't really understand the rolling. I don't know how walking works is really what I'm saying, Colbey. So so when you've got this electrical stimulation for walking, you're obviously trying to mimic the pattern of how you're meant to move your feet. But for people who've actually never had to move their feet in their lives, how does that work with walking? Like, how does walking work?
Once again, we could have a whole nother episode just on walking. It's something that I work on all the time. It's a really important functional thing. So I think the best way to think of walking is there's always, and this is kind of with every movement, there's a butterfly effect. If you have something wrong going at the ankles, then to compensate, you're going to have something wrong going at the knee. To compensate, you're going to do something wrong at the hip. Then you're going to do something that's not good, so good for your back and your spine. Everything starts to get out of whack. Your brain learns this wrong pattern, and you get all sorts of secondary consequences from that: pain, joints wearing out, tripping over, falling, all of those things that could be avoided if you sort of fix that butterfly effect right at the start. Walking, the most common thing is usually at the ankle. That's where we sort of have an issue, and then all of those problems will sort of feed up the chain from there. So that's where this is really useful. You could do a similar thing with maybe transfers or posture. And same sort of thing. There's one little thing that's not going right for you. Everything else starts to compensate. Your joints start to wear out. You start to damage your shoulders, that sort of thing. So there's programs with Fez for transfers. It will teach you what muscles need to come on at what time. So then you can go, oh yeah, even if you don't have specific weakness, you can actually go, I feel this muscle coming on, then this muscle coming on. Now I do my transfer. The actual Fez hasn't made you stronger. It's just helped you to get more coordinated. So you're turning the right muscles on at the right time.
Okay. So what have we covered? We've covered the how. We've covered the who. Is there a certain specific activity for functional and for the other one, NMES?
Yep, NMES.
Yeah, where you need to make sure it's being used at this time. It can't be used at whatever time.
Yeah, definitely. Look, NMES is just hundreds of repetition on each muscle group every day. Look, they say for a lot of things in terms of strengthening, when you're not able to lift something or lift your limb or move your joint against gravity, you want to get up to 300 repetitions in an hour to try and really increase that strength. There is no upper limit. Because you're not actually going to wear the muscle out, you're not going to have what we call DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. You might have felt it when you go to the gym, those muscles are sore. If you're not able to work your muscle that hard, you'll never get that. So you just need repetition, and that's going to build up the muscle strength, and that's also going to help to rewire your brain. So that's what it's all about. So in terms of NMES, it's just lots of repetition regularly. So get into a habit of just trying to do it as often as you can. Every day would be greatest, but look, there's no sort of upper limit in how much you can do. You'd really want to do it as much as you can for each of those muscle groups. Gets to the point where it can be very time consuming.
100 an hour?
Yeah, you want to just go for it. 100 to 300 is where we would aim, and that's the sort of limit where you're going to start to reorganize your brain. And that's exactly the same thing that we'd do for something that was functional. So we'd want to try and make it not too difficult, that you're not getting up to that point. But yeah, so it's quite a balancing act. It can be very repetitive and can get pretty boring. So we have to find ways to just make sure that you can really hit that hard.
So how do you keep it interesting then? How do you keep between 1 and 300 an hour interesting?
Look, that is a very good question. Often you can't. It's more about that you got to see the results. So it's just really push through that first part. When you start to see the results, that should be motivation within itself. When you start to go, all right, I couldn't move my arm at all down by my side. Now I'm able to bend it a little bit, or now I'm able to hold a little bit of weight. I can lift a pen up to the table. Little bits like that. That's kind of your motivation. So we have to, once again, NMES is great to try and push that strength, but then we need to see the functional benefits. We need to sort of see the results. That's your motivator.
I was actually thinking just now, so if you're doing repetitive tasks, and we've talked about it at length in this podcast, let's say the patient is distracted by television or whatever while they're doing these tasks. Have you found that people do it better, worse, the same than when they don't have any distraction and they're just fully focusing on that one thing like 200 times?
Yeah. If you have the mental capacity to fully focus on it, you probably will do better, because you don't want to just let the machine do it all for you if possible. You really want to try and actively engage your muscles as much as they can physically do it at the same time. So if you have that ability, I think at some point you're going to be able to do it relatively distracted, as long as you can still have your wits about you enough to contribute to that movement, because you want your brain to be learning those messages. So you don't just want to passively let the sort of machine go for it. There is an exception, and there are other benefits to things like FES and NMES as well. So anything that builds muscle strength is building muscle size like this. If we build muscle size, it's really good for blood flows, circulation. It can be really good for fitness, really, really good for skin integrity. You build more muscle, you've got more padding on those areas that could potentially break down. I think that's a really, really important one. It can be really good for bone health as well. If you're using FES enough, your muscles are pulling on your bones. They're actually making your bones stronger. It's a big issue. People that aren't weight bearing will start to experience osteoporosis. You can end up with nasty fractures. So it's a really good way to manage that. So there's lots and lots of other benefits as well. I'd just say give it a try. Like, you might love the sensation, you might hate it, but it's really good to know. And it's just such a more natural way with very minimal side effects to try pain management. And look, if you can get stronger in the right areas, or you can just get more coordinated with things you're already doing, it's 100% worthwhile giving it a go. Look, it might just open a whole new avenue that you haven't really delved into yet. Don't be thrown off by how much we want you to do. Find something that works for you. There's probably still going to be benefits no matter how much you're doing. Anything's going to be better than nothing.
Well, because, now correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody's doing it 1 to 300 times an hour, that's not 1 to 300 times an hour for life, right? So like, once you get strong enough in that muscle group, then obviously I assume, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you won't need to do it so often.
Yeah, 100%. If you can do a movement that you couldn't do before, you're most likely doing that movement regularly anyways. So you don't actually need the strength. You actually could probably progress to something that's different in terms of strengthening. So say you couldn't bend your elbow against gravity, you use this, you build up the muscle, you rewire your brain. Now you can bend your elbow against gravity. You're doing that all the time. Or you're then increasing your strength to actually starting to use a bit of resistance. So you can actually do a different form of strength training that doesn't require the electrical stimulation anymore, because you're actually able to use your brain to do what that machine was doing. I think it's a really important one. Maybe you're early on in a stroke or spinal cord injury, you're still going to get a level of recovery. Keep that muscle strong. You're not going to have to build up from basically square one. You've kind of kept your muscle strength there, or you've really stimulated it to come back a bit quicker, so it can be really, really useful, especially early on.
All right, Colbey, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.